I'm a grown man that takes baths, and now I'm supposed to be out and about filling obligations?
People are gonna be back out there socializing, working, accomplishing their goals. How do you think that makes us feel? We have a routine.
Usually I get up around 2. I leave the lights on because why bother? I haven't made my bed since last March. I just sleep on top of the covers. You know, it's lazy, it's fine.
Pizza's here.
Want to rock, paper, scissors for who gets it?
Isn't there like an app?
Hey, come in! Jiggle the handle. Maybe next week I'll get sheets.
When I cook food, I clean a single dish and fork.
Ever since I was young, I told my parents I wanted to be an artist, and I've literally made no moves towards that goal. And for a year and a half, that was completely fine. Yeah, the guitar's right there, but, you know, lazy.
Most nights I sleep with my clothes on.
You know, Fauci, Cuomo, Newsom, they all had our backs and keeping things locked down as long as humanly possible.
My family wants me to come visit next weekend. It's an hour drive.
Crazy thing here, some people actually love being told what to do, and there's people actually like that in the world. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Okadowski of WeAreChange.org. Absolute backwards lunacy happening in the world right now, as it looks like without any vote, without any debate, without any conversation, there already is some kind of medical passport implemented here, as of course we have new, shocking data and details from the states of Texas and Florida that you will not believe. And before we get into that, plus a lot more, the small clip that we began today's broadcast with is, of course, from a full video by Ryan Long, which is linked down in the description below. He does amazing work and definitely deserves a lot more subscribers than he has. Or I wanted to address the urban decay. No, not the urban decay outside of gate D14 at the Miami airport where there was a recent conflict at, but just the overall urban decay that's happening all throughout the United States. Now, being an avid traveler, visiting some of the biggest cities in the United States just this year alone, I think it's fair to say that something's happening, and it's definitely not good. We are seeing waves of violence, crime, and assault escalate dramatically, especially against women in places like New York City. That is also seeing a tremendous spike in shootings in predominantly democratically run cities, states that, of course, let's be honest here, implement policies that have a direct correlation into this new wave of human suffering that is dominating big cities. In New York City, shootings went up 77% in a year, predominantly with the use of pistols, with people of color predominantly being the victim and the aggressor here. We have to understand that this is a major problem, that with more democratic rule, more democratic corporatist policies will only be getting worse from here. Now, a lot of the mainstream media forgets to talk about some of the core details here and just blames this on a tool that is used here, and a lot of times they obfuscate the true reality of these incidences in order to push an agenda that would make a lot of law-abiding citizens totally disarmed. They don't talk about the crux of this issue, where it's happening, to whom it's happening, why it's happening, as they call for the same failed policies nationally that, in my opinion, and according to many other political scientists, have created the current situation that they're in. New York City, a communist hellhole that I escaped last year, which is run by the corporatist Democrats in almost every single level of government, is becoming dirtier and filthier by the day in many wide-ranging examples, with, of course, the latest one, a rat problem, after the city cut $100 million into the city's sanitation budget in order to fulfill a lot of their woke agenda. I'm so happy that I was able to leave that smelly, trash-filled, that hipster and yuppie-infested hellscape, and in large part, I was able to escape because of your support on wearechange.org/donate. Your support is greatly appreciated, especially with us being fully demonetized. I will have a very important video on lukeuncensored.com today, specifically focusing on the larger context of what's happening in India and more of the troubling signs from places that implement the establishment policies the most. Lots to get into. It will be right after this video, specifically on lukeuncensored.com. Click the link down below to find out more information about it right now. Now, just jumping into our main story, if you remember almost a year ago, we told you that Sweden would be a very important case study to really fully understand the larger consequences of what's happening in this world. Joining Sweden and the United States, we had few states like Texas and Florida recently implement similar measures. Now, the case of Sweden, again, to be intellectually honest here, is very complex. It's not just as simplistic as I made it, but I think some of the preliminary data found through the case study of Sweden and last year do specifically highlight a lot of important information that is worth considering, especially on the backdrop of this latest information and the data coming in from states like Florida and Texas that are fully open, have no mask mandates, and they're reporting fewer new cases per capita than in states with mask mandates and some of the strictest lockdowns in all of the world. Definitely the strictest lockdowns in the United States, and these states are Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New York. So something strange here is obviously going on that is countering the large narrative that is being pushed by the establishment, the large swaths of the mainstream media, and individuals like Dr. Fauci, which we will be talking about in just a little bit. Now, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of different factors that you could entertain here. But with specifically Florida, the state that I'm in right now, we have seen absolute hyperbolic, sensational fear-mongering about almost non-stop. They have a bigger elderly population than New York. They have more urban areas, more cities, more people populated in those cities, and the huge catastrophe that all the, quote, medical professionals and mainstream media said was going to happen here in Florida hasn't happened. In New York and in Michigan, the cases are absolutely ratcheting up to extreme levels according to the official data, and this should really make people ask some serious, legitimate questions, as of course there is some preliminary data showing specifically how a lot of these lockdowns not only create devastating pain and havoc on the poor and middle class while making the rich richer than they ever have been before, with the billionaire class allowed to be open somehow, but there's preliminary data showing how there could be counterintuitive in creating a worse off situation medically than, of course, places that didn't. But still, somehow, in places like Canada, there's absurd attacks on churches during religious services, going after people who want to practice their religion in absolute disturbing ways by the authorities that are doing this, fining people, hurting people, locking them away for the crime of existing, and that's absolutely absurd. It helps absolutely no one and just hurts them. Even Dr. Fauci, the Lord and Savior of the media industrial complex, of the establishment, is saying that we need to start relaxing some of these lockdowns, some of these mandates, some of these rules, as of course the mainstream media is cheering on about how we should implement these masks permanently for some reason. Now again, Dr. Fauci has been very flippant. He has been changing his policies very sporadically, contradicting himself a lot of the times, and it looks like he will contradict himself again, as of course he came out and said that the transmission of this sickness outdoors is very low, and that the CDC will be updating the mask guidelines very soon, especially for things like exercise. The CDC also came out recently and talked about the sanitation theater that's been going on that also has been almost absolutely pointless, as they came out with data showing that your risk of getting this sickness from a surface is 1 in 10,000, leaving many medical professionals saying that this was all disinfectant theater that was pointless. It's also important to note here, as Dr. Fauci sets up a lot of the policies here, as he of course routinely attends many mainstream media news shows, that he has yet still to be asked about his direct involvement and financing and funding of the level 3 laboratory that was working on variants of this exact sickness with bats with dangerous gain-of-function research in the place in China where this originated in. I wonder why this such important, critical, direct question hasn't yet been asked to Dr. Fauci. In related news, we have this article from the Washington Times that talks about how they worry about how hundreds of U.S. scientists could be compromised by China. As of course, the National Institute of Health just released information that more than 500 federally funded, taxpayer-funded scientists are under investigation for, quote, being compromised by China. This is not a joke here. We know Chinese spying, hacking, and intrusions against the United States have been absolutely common. We know that there's been a large swap of intellectual property stolen, specifically even gain of function studies stolen by the Chinese spy agencies. We know the Chinese routinely subvert the United States economically, especially in the field of biomedicine. And honestly speaking, from my research, my analysis, if our medical community was compromised by the Chinese government, this would not be a surprise to me. Again, explosive article by the Washington Times. Definitely recommend getting it out there to the general public, as of course many of these scientists institute policies that are absolutely absurd. As the latest policy has been announced that hasn't been voted on, hasn't been debated, there hasn't been a national conversation on, no one said that this was okay, but a new medical passport has already been implemented without the consent of the people, as the European Commission president and also former Bilderberg member, I confronted this lady before, announced by her own decree that Americans will officially need a medical passport of the shot to travel into Europe in 2021. Again, this is creating a two-tier unjust society. There's a lot of people with medical conditions that are preventing them from taking the shot. And to take away the people's right to travel, to move around, if they don't go through a medical procedure that the government wants them to go through, is absolutely draconian and insane. As, of course, American and European officials are now discussing on how to create this medical certificate that the European Union announced that, quote, all 27 member states will accept unconditionally. This definitely sounds like rule by decree rather than the absolute law of the governed even having any say about this. This is essentially the return of the monarchy here and is uncalled for, should be pushed back against, and is absolutely troubling to say the least. And we have to ask ourselves, why aren't people with natural immunity allowed to travel, as of course many medical professionals have come out and described how people who have natural immunity from this sickness shouldn't get this procedure because, one, it's unnecessary, and two, it's leading to complications. And it would be more rational and understanding, even according to the official story, to allow people who have antibodies and are immune to be allowed in. But no, they're not doing that. You have to have their shot in order to see your family, in order to go to a funeral, in order to go back to see other loved ones. I mean, this is absolutely crazy and totally backwards, as individuals who were previously screaming, "My body, my choice," are now advocating for this in some way. Also, there's a lot of troubling developments with places that are receiving the shot, and we're going to get into that, LukeUncensored.com. In the United Kingdom, there's already petitions to make this international medical passport illegal, which the UK government has been milling about and most likely will be implementing. As of course, this is going to prevent a large majority of people from being able to travel. This has also been one of the goals of many climate change enthusiasts and activists that have been trying to stop people from traveling. Very coincidentally, a lot of the policies that a lot of climate change activists have been calling for within the last few years have been actually implemented under these lockdowns, including the advocating for eating less meat and eating GMO meat that, of course, Bill Gates has heavily invested in. Bill Gates, by the way, also came out and said that, quote, he is hopeful that the world will be completely back to normal by the end of 2022, even though it was just supposed to be 2 weeks. Bill Gates also, by the way, is expanding his ventures and investment into New York City. This is almost like the plot line from the original RoboCop. If you haven't watched that movie, I definitely recommend you go check it out. As, of course, many people are fleeing New York City, and Bill Gates is expanding into it in a very opportune way, as of course he is enriching himself to wealth that the world has never seen before. Also, a person heavily invested in the shot that also is making him even richer from here. How convenient for him, to say the least. Again, I got a lot more I need to get into. I want to say, I need to say, 50 cents a day, lukeonzetzer.com. It's going to be very imperative. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys watching and sharing these videos, and because you guys do, I'm still here, and I'm still extremely grateful for this opportunity to be able to do this research, delve it out to you, and give you some kind of larger perspective that you wouldn't normally have. If you thought I did that, sharing this video is one of the best things you could do, and because you do that, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.